Hello, welcome to another episode of the Virtual Ninja Show. My name is Heike, I will be the host, and today we are going to talk about Defender for Identity PowerShell modules. And with me, I have Martin. Martin, please introduce yourself.
Hello, Heike. Hello, everybody. My name is Martin Schvartzman. I am one of the product managers for Defender for Identity. I'm responsible mostly for all related to deployment. That would include the sensor, health issues, and everything that you need to have in your environment ready to run MDI.
So, Martin, you also published a blog post about it, and it had thousands of views just like a few days after it was published. And also lots of people tried it out. We had some comments. So I think it's super interesting. That's why we are here. So let's start first. Why are these PowerShell modules needed?
Awesome. That's a great question. Thank you, Heike. So I've been talking to customers since I joined the group about what they really feel they need in terms of MDI deployment. What are their pain points? What could we help them do easier? And there are a lot of things that we used to call them prerequisites that you needed to do before you deploy MDI. You needed to configure auditing and permissions and different configurations in your environment. And the way to do that was very manual. And what we ended up doing, besides trying to remove those prerequisites as much as possible, we decided to try and automate things so it would be easier for customers to automate them.
So from the blog, of course, I read the blog. I understood that there's, of course, also different environments like multi-domains and single and different forests. And is this also part of the complexity here?
Yes, definitely. When customers have large and complex environments, they would need to go over each of those environments and configure all these things that they need to configure as many times as they have domains or forests, for example.
And with the scripts, you do it once, or you also go from one environment to the other?
For the version that we have today, it does not accept like a multi-forest environment. So you would need to run the same commands at all the environments, but it is kind of almost just a single command. And in the future, it will support using several separate credentials, and you would just need to run that once.
Okay, wonderful. So you already mentioned some of the prerequisites as permissions. Do you need some specific accounts, or what are the few things that are needed? I think we have a documentation probably somewhere.
Yes, there's a long list of post-deployment configurations, so we don't block customers from deploying MDI. Just to give one example that you gave about the permissions, we used to require setting up a directory services account. So that account would be used by the sensor to start up and communicate to the domain. So this was one of the prerequisites that we actually removed. Customers don't need to specify that DSA for the sensor to start. There are separate scenarios that we would need that account, but at least for start, they don't need that. They can simply just install the sensor and at least it will start.
Okay, so I think let's start with the prerequisites or pre-deployment settings that you mentioned and how they have been done manually, and then how we can automate all of this.
Awesome. So let me show you. So if you can see my screen now, this is one of the documentation pages, and this is a very, very long doc that if I scroll down, you would see we actually included now the examples for the PowerShell command. But if I scroll down, you would see the instructions on how to do these things manually. And if I continue to scroll, you see that this is a very, very long document. The problem was that customers were not following this document very well, and sometimes they missed the instructions, and they would give too many permissions or give too many configurations for auditing that would cause their servers to have unnecessary load. So instead of following this very, very long, as you can see here, document, we can switch now to the PowerShell module and see how we would do this automatically.
I'm pretty sure, Martin, that some people still love to do all these manual steps. I remember when I tried to set something up, that was always super exciting to go through a long, long list. But of course, I think it's also it will reduce the errors and the mistakes that people can do when it's automated. So let's jump into what's automated.
Yes, definitely. I would just add to that it is important to do at least once the things manually to understand what is actually happening under the hood. But when you have several environments, yes, less error prone to do stuff automatically. So let me start with running the test MDI readiness script. And this is something that we released about a year ago to help customers run in their environments and make sure that they have everything configured and their environment being optimal for MDI. This would get me an HTML report, and I'm now skipping the certificate authority servers just for the sake of time. And what you would see here that I have a lot of reds, all these red boxes that says false, meaning that this is something that I need to fix in my environment. These three at the top are the ones that we saw earlier in the documentation page, and also other parts of auditing like advanced auditing and NTLM auditing. Mm-hmm. So now that you see that I have some stuff that I need to fix, let's go and start fixing them. First of all, I would install the module. And obviously, this is something that you just need to do once. And you can do this on your machine and then copy the files to the server. You don't have to do this on each of your servers in the environment.
And people can find those modules in the documentation, right?
Of course. All the references are there. And also, if you obviously want to Google for it, you will get links to all this documentation. Okay, now that I've installed the module, I can simply import the module. And then I can start by looking at which commands did I get with this cool module. As you can see here, we have several get, set, and test functions. And the reason for this is because we wanted to have this in a kind of an idempotent way that will be later easy to implement in a desired state configuration module if someone in the community would like to do so. Let me start with something simple that I can start by testing the directory services account that I plan to use for MDI. Mm-hmm. So as I mentioned before, this is something that we've removed in the past. You don't have to specify a DSA now in the portal for the sensor to start, but there are several capabilities that we do need this directory services account. For example, the SUMR requests for the lateral movement path calculation. And whenever we have like sensors that are not on the main controllers, for example, ADFS or ADCS.
So it's recommended still?
Definitely recommended to have a DSA.
Thank you.
So let me start with testing a specific identity that I know shouldn't be that good to use for Defender for Identity. And this should get me back a result of false because this account is not set up correctly. If I add the -details switch, I will get more information as to why this is not the account that I should be using.
So whilst we are waiting, what is a proper account that you should use? It shouldn't be a normal user account from someone who is like having a regular other work. So is it a service account dedicated for that specific function?
So what we recommend is to use a specific service account. Actually, we recommend to use what we call a GMSA, a Group Managed Service Account. But you can also use a regular domain services account. We just need it to have read-only permissions on the Active Directory and read permissions on the deleted objects container. So in this case that you see here, my username is not good to be used as a DSA because I am a member of a sensitive group. I'm a member of the domain admins, and this is actually too many permissions that we should be having in the first place. So instead of that, let me just run with a different account. And this is the account that I'm actually using for MDI. And this should all be back as true. As you can see here, this account is not a member of any sensitive group. It does not have any explicit delegation, so it does not have any permissions on OUs or containers. It's not a manager of anything, and it does have the specific permissions on the deleted objects container.
So you are testing this now, but if you had a, let's say, the service account MDI SVC01 would still give you some faults because it is, I don't know, it doesn't have read permissions or something. Can your module fix this?
That's a great question. So we don't have that capability yet. In the next version of the module, we plan to have a new MDI DSA function that would help you create that account, that new account with all the permissions that it needs. This is one of the improvements that we are planning for the next version.
Thank you. Huh. Glad I'm asking good questions here. So what's next? Let's test or let's configure. What are we doing?
So I want to just use one more test. This is the test MDI sensor API connection function. And this is good to use not only if you already installed the sensor, but also if you didn't deploy MDI yet and you just want to make sure that your environment is configured, like if you have proxy set up in place and you want to make sure that you are setting up the exclusions that you need to set up, or if you are using express route and you need to validate the routing. So the test MDI sensor API connection without any parameters, again, will just give me back a true or false. And let me quickly add here a verbose switch so I see what is happening under the hood. So it's going on to see if I have the service installed and grabbing the configuration file for that service, for the sensor, and reading the URL that it needs to access. So if I did not install the sensor yet, what I can do is use the bypass configuration switch and just add a sensor API URL. So in this case, I would just copy this part. And as you can see, it's coming back as true. And if I want to test this like with a different proxy or a different set of credentials, I can do that with the same command.
Okay, so now we tested the account and the sensor API connection. What are usually the first steps that someone does after tests?
So let me just quickly clear the screen and go back to the list of commands that we had. So you can see here, I also have commands to set the proxy configuration if we want to, or to clear the proxy configuration if we want to. But going on to the configurations or those post-deployment configurations that we actually wanted, let's start with the test MDI configuration. So running this command without any parameters is going to prompt me for specific values. So I'm going to run this with the mode, and I'm going to select here the local machine mode. And for the configuration, I'm going to set a specific configuration that I want to check. Let's give an example of NTLM auditing. So this command here with this switches and parameters, what is actually testing is if I have the NTLM auditing configuration requirement applied on this local machine. And as we saw earlier in the test MDI readiness output that we have here in the background, this is something that is not configured correctly. So if I wanted to fix this, what I could do is instead of running the test MDI configuration, I can run the set MDI configuration. Definitely yes. So this is it. It took less than a second. What it does, it sets the configuration on the local machine. On the registry, it's actually policy registry settings that need to be applied. But obviously, this is not very scalable because I don't want to set this on every machine that I have in my environment. I would want to do this on a domain level. So instead of just setting this on the local machine, I would do the same, but with the domain. So if I just change this to domain, and this time instead of running NTLM auditing, let's choose something different. Let's choose the ADFS auditing, for example. So what it does now, it goes to the domain itself, to the relevant container, and checks for the configuration, for the auditing configuration on that domain. Obviously, we saw this earlier too. It is marked as false, and it is not set. So I can run this, the set instead, and everything should be set okay. Now let's continue with the policy that I just mentioned. And instead of running a test on a specific configuration, let's run a configuration all. So as you can see here, this is kind of a report that I get on the output that gives me details on the various configurations that are needed and if they are already in place or not, either on the domain auditing configuration or as group policy objects. So I did configure before the NTLM auditing on this machine, but it does not have a GPO that can be applied on all the machines in the domain. So if I want to just fix this one as a group policy, I would run this again, the set MDI configuration with the NTLM auditing. And let's just add a verbose real quickly to see the output. So as you can see, it's creating the group policy object and it's linking it everywhere it needs. And I want to go there for just a second to explain what it does. If I just refresh here, I would see this new Defender for Identity NTLM auditing for DC's group policy object that got created from the PowerShell command. And because we do know where the domain controllers should be, it's easy for the module to understand that and to link that group policy object to the domain controller's container. Refreshing here, we would see this as well. There are a few configurations that I will show in a second that we don't have a way of knowing before where those servers are, for example, the certificate authority servers. So we do have a little trick that I will show you. But if I wanted to fix everything and not just a specific configuration with just one go, and let's say this is a lab environment or my clean environment that I've never set up MDI before, I can use this command with the configuration all.
So two of the settings were configured properly. We had the ADFS auditing on the domain controller and now also the NTDS auditing or something. Two
NTLM.
were NTLM, sorry. So, and now, even though you say all, it will not do something wrong because it had been set already. So that doesn't.
Yeah, definitely, yes. The way that idempotency works, it first checks if the setting is there, and if not, it applies what needs to be fixed. This is part of the desired state configuration, I would say, methodology.
Wow.
So I set here everything up with the mode domain and configuration all. So for example, it set up the IDFS auditing and the domain object auditing, the advanced auditing as a group policy and all that. So if I were to go back to the group policy and hit refresh here, I would see all these new group policy objects. As I was explaining earlier, the audit policy for certificate authority servers, we have no way of knowing where those servers are. So what we do is to link it to the top of the domain, but obviously we don't want that to be applied on all the machines in the domain. So we use a cert publishers group for the security filtering. And this is a group that by default contains all the certificate authority servers that you've set up in your environment. And we can use this for the security filtering. Having said that, for the processor performance, this is something that we also require customers to set up for all the servers that have an MDI sensor on. We just link this now to the domain controllers OU, and we don't want to link it anywhere else because we, as I mentioned, don't have a way of knowing. And we would ask customers to link it or to add it to the other service that they need to configure this for.
And we have this written somewhere in the blog, in the documentation and everywhere. Okay, good.
Yes. So if I were to wait about 2 hours for these group policies to be applied on my machines, I would probably see that everything is now cleaned up. But this is a small, very small environment. I can just go back to the test MDI readiness.
The very first command that you did where everything was red?
Yes. Hopefully now I will see everything green without having to touch anything manually. Almost. So I would have to wait for DC1 to have applied all those group policies, but in a couple of minutes that should fix that as well.
Wow. Yeah, so I understand. I have never installed Defender for Identity, and I have not checked all the prerequisites and all the things. So I understand why people are super excited to get this automated, just looking at the different group policy objects and all these things that someone has to create and imagine bigger environment, more things to think about and getting it right. Of course, this is version 1. It was released last month, late last month. And there is always room for improvements, and new requests are coming in that you get. So I would assume that once in a while there will be a new version coming. Is that the plan?
Yes, definitely, of course. So we released this, and I would say we kind of knew there were a few gaps, as mentioned before, with the new DSA that we want to create. We are aware of a few bugs that people have discovered, and we are planning not only to update the module because of this bug and the new capabilities, but whenever MDI would have a new sensor flavor, as we call it, we would add the requirements to this module. So you would simply go and run the same command with this set MDI configuration, -configuration all, and it would just add what needs to be added. So we plan a lot of new things for the module. And actually, we're partnering with people from the Meerkat team that were very, very helpful before with some of the ideas for this module, and are going to be now part of the team that is actually going to write it and update that. And when we feel comfortable enough, we also plan to open it for the whole community to contribute to the module.
Nice. And I can see so many people that already went through the setup and everything is working fine. They're like, I still want to play with it. So everybody can use the tests, right? And you don't need a complex environment to just set it up and run. So for everyone who already went all the manual way, thanks. And thanks for the patience. But yes, go and check it out and try it out for your next MDI deployment. Martin, any last words? Anything you would like to let people know or tell them about your project?
Actually, yes. I mean, we are planning, as I mentioned, to add new capabilities, but I would love to get feedback from the community. Where do you think that we should improve, or what else do you think we should add? For example, we plan to add the capabilities that the test MDI readiness script has. It is kind of different to what the module has, because the module is just either checking the group policies or checking the local machine that the module is running on. And the test MDI readiness can remotely query all the domain controllers that you have in the domain. So we're going to merge those capabilities and add a bunch of more. But I would love to hear what else do you need. And if you find bugs, of course, let me know.
So should people use the blog post to comment with feedback, suggestions? I mean, they can also, of course, use the comments on the YouTube video, but is there any other way you want them to reach out?
I would say that the blog post is a good place. That way people can read other comments and maybe know before they post a new comment or a new request that someone else already suggested that.
Martin, thank you so much for being my expert on today's show. Thanks everyone for watching. Don't forget to check out aka.ms/ninja show for all the upcoming episodes. Put them on your calendar and join us next week again. Thanks everyone. Bye.